A woman discovers the truth about her man and finds her own path, the betrayal. It was a cold evening when Sarah decided to leave work early. Her mind had been busy all week, caught up in meetings, deadlines, and endless tasks. But today, for some reason, she felt an overwhelming need to get home sooner, to surprise Liam, her boyfriend of 3 years. She'd been planning for days, a cozy night in his favorite dinner, and a small surprise gift she picked up during lunch. It had been a while since they had spent quality time together, and Sarah wanted to remind him of how much he meant to her. As she walked down the street, her heart lifted at the thought of seeing Liam. She was excited to tell him about her new project at work, the promotion she had been quietly hoping for, and everything that had been happening in her life. She couldn't wait to share her success with him, to show him that they were a team and that they could face anything together. When she reached their apartment building, Sarah's steps slowed as she noticed something odd. An unfamiliar car parked in their spot. It wasn't unusual for Liam to have friends over, but the car looked too fancy, too out of place. A feeling of unease washed over her, but she brushed it aside. Maybe it's a client of his. She thought Liam worked as a financial consultant, so it wouldn't be unheard of for him to meet someone for a late meeting. But as Sarah made her way up the stairs to their apartment, something inside her felt off. Her keys felt heavy in her hand. As she approached the door, she unlocked it quietly, not wanting to interrupt whatever conversation was going on inside. What she wasn't expecting, however, was the sound of laughter. Laughter that wasn't hers, laughter that wasn't his. Her stomach lurched and she felt a sharp pang in her chest. Her first instinct was to turn around and leave, but curiosity and something else, a sense of dread, compelled her to step inside, and that was when she saw it. Liam, sitting on the couch with a woman who was not her. They were so engrossed in their conversation, so caught up in their laughter, that they didn't hear her footsteps. The woman, younger than Sarah, with long flowing brown hair, had her hand resting on Liam's knee, and his fingers were lightly brushing against hers. For a moment everything froze, time seemed to stand still, and Sarah felt as though the world around her had become a blur. Her heartbeat echoed in her ears, drowning out the sounds in the room. She couldn't tear her eyes away from them. The scene before her, the betrayal, so raw, so undeniable, was something she never thought she would face. Liam turned towards her just as Sarah took a step back, her heart pounding painfully in her chest. He froze, his face going pale as he saw her standing there, shocked, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Sarah, wait." He began, his voice trembling, as he stood up too quickly, knocking over a glass of wine on the coffee table. The woman beside him looked confused but didn't speak. She was just watching Sarah, almost as if she didn't belong there. The silence in the room was deafening. Sarah felt as though she was suffocating. Her throat tightened and her words were caught in her chest. She didn't know what to say, how to react. Her mind was in a fog, the reality of what she was witnessing too much to process. "Please just let me explain," Liam continued, his voice softer now, almost pleading. He stepped toward her, but Sarah took a step back, shaking her head in disbelief. The tears that had been threatening to fall for so long were now hovering at the edges of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not yet." "Explain," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of years of trust shattered in an instant. There's nothing to explain, Liam. I just walked in and saw it all. There's no explanation that could make sense of this." She turned on her heel, her fingers gripping the doorframe as she pulled it shut behind her. She didn't wait to hear what he had to say. She couldn't. All she could hear was the sound of her heart breaking. Outside, the chill of the evening air hit her like a slap to the face, but it felt like a welcome relief. She wasn't sure where she was going, only that she couldn't stay there. Not in that apartment. Not in that life, not with him. Sarah walked aimlessly, the tears she had been holding back now streaming down her face. She didn't care about the cold or the strangers who glanced at her as she passed by. All she could think about was the man she had loved. The man she had trusted, who had betrayed her so completely. The street seemed to stretch on forever. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. The notifications were a blur of messages from Liam. Messages she couldn't bear to look at. Her heart ached, but not just from the pain of what she had seen. It ached because a part of her had always known something was wrong. She had been so busy with her job, so caught up in her own world, that she hadn't seen the signs. At some point, Sarah found herself at a small cafe tucked away from the main street. She was shivering, not just from the cold, but from the weight of everything crashing down on her. She ordered a coffee, her hands trembling as she dug through her purse for cash. It felt like the world had just come to a halt, and she was standing in the middle of it, frozen, unsure of what to do next. Sitting in the corner of the cafe, she wiped her eyes and tried to steady her breath. She couldn't stay here forever. She needed to go back and face it. But what was there to face? What was left? Her mind raced, going through every moment she had shared with Liam, the good times, the bad times, and all the little things in between. But now they seemed so meaningless, like a film reel that had suddenly broken. At that moment, Sarah realized something. She wasn't just angry at Liam. She wasn't just hurt. She was disappointed in herself. She had given so much of herself to him, to the relationship, and now it was all falling apart. But even in her heartbreak, a small voice in her mind told her something important. You deserve better. And in that moment, for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a small flicker of strength. She had the chance to start over, to find herself again without him, rebuilding from the ashes. The days after Sarah walked out of that apartment felt like an endless blur. The weight of what had happened, the betrayal that had shattered everything she thought she knew, hung heavily over her like a dark cloud. She hadn't returned to the apartment. The thought of facing Liam, hearing his excuses, seeing his face again was too much for her to bear. Instead, she had thrown herself into work. Sarah had always been a career-driven woman, but this was different. This wasn't just about meeting deadlines or impressing clients. It was about keeping her mind busy, distracted from the chaos of her life. The publishing company she worked for had been a source of pride for her, and while her personal life had crumbled, the professional side of her world remained intact, at least for now. But the truth was, every corner of her apartment, every walk to her car, every cup of coffee she had with a colleague was haunted by Liam. Her body was physically present at work, but her mind wandered to him more times than she cared to admit. She couldn't help but think about the woman in their apartment, the woman who had replaced her so easily, as if she was nothing more than a placeholder. One evening, a few days after the incident, Sarah found herself walking down the same familiar street. She hadn't planned to, but her feet seemed to take her there on their own, as if they remembered the path to her old life. Her heart clenched as she passed by the bakery they used to stop at on weekends. The smell of fresh bread and pastries filled the air. But all it did was remind her of the mornings she had spent with Liam, laughing over their coffee and planning their future. She paused for a moment, staring at the bakery window, trying to suppress the flood of memories that threatened to overwhelm her. And then she heard a voice, a soft voice, gentle but clear, calling her name, Sarah. She turned quickly, startled, only to find a familiar face standing behind her. It was Lucas, a longtime colleague and a friend from work. He had always been kind to her, often staying late at the office to help her with various projects. They'd shared lunches, laughed together during stressful moments, and exchanged stories of their own lives, but it had never been anything more than friendship. Hey, Sarah said, wiping her eyes quickly, trying to hide the emotions that had crept up on her. Are you okay? Lucas asked, his eyes soft with concern. You seem off lately. Sarah hesitated. She wanted to say everything, the hurt, the betrayal, the confusion, but something held her back. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the overwhelming sense of shame that clung to her. Instead, she simply nodded. I'm fine. Just a lot on my mind. Lucas studied her for a moment, then smiled gently. Want to grab a coffee? I know a place nearby. The offer was unexpected, but something about it was comforting. She didn't feel like talking to anyone else, but Lucas had always made her feel at ease. And maybe, just maybe, she needed to be around someone who wasn't connected to her past with Liam. Sure, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. They walked to the nearby cafe, and as they settled into a quiet corner, Sarah found herself telling Lucas bits and pieces of what had happened. She didn't go into every painful detail, but she didn't need to. Lucas listened without judgment, offering quiet words of encouragement and support as she spoke. You don't deserve that, Sarah, he said softly after a while. You deserve someone who treats you with respect, who values you for who you are, not just for what you can offer them. The sincerity in his voice made Sarah's heart ache. She had always known that Liam had his flaws, but she never thought he would hurt her like this. She had invested so much of herself into their relationship, into the dream of a future together, only for it to be ripped away in one painful moment. But how do I move on? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. How do I let go of everything? Lucas took a deep breath, then reached across the table, placing his hand over hers. One step at a time. Start with today. Focus on the things that make you happy, the things that bring you peace. It's not about forgetting what happened, but learning how to move forward with the knowledge that you are stronger than you think. Sarah stared at him for a long moment, feeling a rush of gratitude for his kindness. He wasn't pushing her to forget about Liam or telling her to get over it. He was simply offering a safe space, a place where she could heal at her own pace. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible. Over the next few weeks, Sarah made small changes in her life. She rearranged her apartment, Not to forget Liam, but to reclaim the space for herself. She started spending more time with friends, reconnecting with people she had neglected during her relationship with him. She took long walks in the park, enjoyed quiet evenings with a good book, and even picked up a new hobby, painting. The act of creating something beautiful, something entirely her own, helped her to heal. Each brushstroke was a small act of reclaiming her identity, of rediscovering who Sarah was outside of her relationship with Liam. But it wasn't just about the physical changes. She started doing the emotional work too, the anger, the hurt, the disappointment. They were all still there, buried deep beneath the surface, but Sarah had begun to face them. She couldn't move on until she acknowledged the pain, allowed herself to feel it, and slowly started to let it go. It was in these quiet moments, away from the chaos of her former life, that Sarah began to realize something important. She didn't need Liam to complete her. She didn't need him to define her worth or to make her feel whole. She was already whole. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a sense of freedom. The kind of freedom that comes from knowing that you are enough exactly as you are, without anyone's validation. But as she would soon learn, healing was a journey that would take her into unexpected places and introduce her to new people, including someone who would change her life forever. A chance encounter. Sarah had always been a person who found comfort in the quiet, in the routine. But as the days passed, she realized that her life could no longer be about just existing. It had to be about living again. Her apartment, now a space filled with new memories, was a reflection of her changing self, no longer haunted by the ghosts of her past. Sarah had come to terms with the reality of what had happened. She wasn't the woman who would wait for someone to define her anymore. She was learning to embrace her own strength and independence. One evening, after a long day of meetings at work, Sarah decided to treat herself to a little time outside. The weather was perfect, chilly enough for a sweater but warm enough for a stroll through the city. She had spent too much time cooped up in her apartment, painting, working, and reflecting on what could have been. Now she needed to reconnect with the world around her. The cafe on the corner of 5th and Pine was Sarah's favorite. It wasn't too crowded, and the barista knew her order by heart. Black coffee, no sugar. She sat by the window, savoring the warmth of the coffee in her hands, and watched the city bustle by outside. For the first time in a while, she felt at peace. As she looked out the window, lost in thought, she noticed a man walking by. He was tall, dressed in a well-tailored suit that spoke of wealth but not arrogance. He had a quiet confidence about him, the kind of confidence that didn't need to be flaunted. He caught her gaze for a moment before his eyes moved away, but not without a slight, almost imperceptible smile. Something about him caught Sarah's attention, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She had no intention of meeting someone that evening after all. She was just enjoying the rare solitude, but the moment lingered with her. Minutes later, as she stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, she noticed the man standing by the counter waiting for his order. Her heart skipped a beat when their eyes met again. This time, he didn't look away. He smiled, and Sarah felt a strange warmth wash over her. The feeling was unfamiliar yet comforting. He approached her table. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, his voice smooth but with a hint of shyness. Sarah looked up, slightly taken aback. She wasn't used to strangers approaching her, but there was something disarming about this man. She smiled softly. "Not at all." He took a seat, setting down his coffee. "I was just wondering, what's a person like you doing sitting alone in a place like this?" His tone wasn't intrusive. Just curious, with a trace of humor in it. Sarah chuckled lightly. "Enjoying a bit of peace and quiet. I like to get away from the noise sometimes." He nodded, as if understanding exactly what she meant. "I get that. The world is loud, isn't it?" he said, his gaze drifting to the street outside. For the next hour they talked. His name was Max. He was a businessman, but not in the way Sarah had expected. He spoke with humility, not boasting about his achievements, but rather speaking with passion about the work he did and the people he helped. It was clear that his success was built on genuine effort, not on shortcuts or manipulation. As they conversed, Sarah found herself laughing more than she had in weeks. There was something comforting about Max's presence. He wasn't like the men she had known before, self-absorbed, consumed with their own world. He seemed genuinely interested in her, not just in her appearance, but in who she was, what she thought, and how she felt. By the time they finished their coffees, the city had grown quiet, the evening falling into the soft hum of the night. Max stood up, pushing in his chair. "Well, I guess this is where we say goodbye," he said with a small, almost hesitant smile. Sarah hesitated for a moment, something stirring within her. She had never been one to make impulsive decisions, but something about Max felt right. Something about him made her want to be brave, to take a chance, to stop hiding from the world. "I don't suppose I could convince you to let me buy you dinner?" she asked before she could stop herself. Max looked surprised for a moment, then smiled warmly. "I think I'd like that," he said. They left the cafe together, stepping into the cool evening air. For the first time in what felt like forever, Sarah felt a spark of something that wasn't related to the past or the pain she had endured. It was something new, something exciting. Dinner was simple but delightful. They found a cozy little bistro not far from the cafe and talked for hours. Max was intelligent, kind, and genuine, and Sarah found herself opening up in ways she hadn't done in years. She told him about her work, her dreams, and yes, about the pain of what had happened with Liam. She didn't go into detail, but she needed him to understand that she wasn't looking for a rebound or a distraction. She was looking for someone who understood what it meant to hurt and to heal. Max listened, never interrupting, only offering quiet support and occasional words of reassurance. It felt different from any conversation Sarah had ever had. It felt like there was space for her to be herself without the need to be anything more or less. As they walked back to her apartment that night, the streets were quiet, the air crisp. Sarah felt a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in a long time. She wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time she wasn't afraid of it. She had made it through the hardest part. She had faced her fears, and she had taken a step forward. And with Max by her side, she felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something new, something good. The choice between the past and the future. The days that followed that evening with Max felt like a turning point for Sarah. She had always been someone who believed in taking things slow, measuring each step carefully, but with Max, everything seemed to unfold effortlessly. Their daily conversations, shared moments of laughter, and casual outings made her feel lighter, more alive. She had spent so long in the shadows of her past, but now she was slowly allowing herself to bask in the sunlight again. It wasn't just the novelty of a new connection that drew Sarah in, it was the ease with which Max understood her. He didn't rush her, didn't press for too much too soon. He was content with the space Sarah needed, but he also gave her the freedom to be herself in ways she had never allowed anyone else to see. One evening, after a week of dinners and long walks through the city, Max asked her to come with him to a local park. It was a simple invitation, but it felt significant. They had been spending so much time in public spaces, cafes, restaurants, and galleries. But this felt more intimate, the kind of thing you did when you were beginning to trust someone completely. The park was peaceful, the soft chirping of birds echoing in the background as they walked down the winding paths. Max reached for her hand, and Sarah instinctively intertwined her fingers with his. It was a small gesture, but it felt meaningful. They didn't speak much at first, letting the quiet of the evening surround them, but there was a comfort in that silence. "I've been thinking," Max finally said, his voice steady but soft, as if testing the waters. Sarah glanced at him, curious. "About what?" "About how you said you were trying to move on," he said, his tone careful. "I know it's not easy, and I don't want to push you into anything, but I think you've got something special inside you, something that's been hidden for too long." She felt a pang in her chest. The words were kind, but they stirred something deep within her, something she had buried in her heart since the end of her relationship with Liam. "I don't know if I'm ready for anything serious," Sarah said, her voice betraying the uncertainty that clouded her thoughts. She wasn't sure if it was fear or a self-doubt talking. The idea of opening her heart to someone again felt both foreign and terrifying. "I'm still trying to figure myself out." Max nodded, his expression understanding, but there was a quiet strength in the way he held her gaze. "I get it, Sarah, I do. But whatever happens, I want you to know that I'm here, not just because I think we could be good together, but because I believe in you. I believe in your strength, your resilience." Sarah stopped walking, pulling her hand from his gently as she faced him. She had to ask the question that had been eating at her for days. "What if you're just a distraction for me?" She asked, her voice low. "What if in a few months I realized that I wasn't really over Liam and that everything we've shared was just me trying to escape my pain?" Max's gaze softened, but he didn't look away. "That's not how I see it," he replied, his voice firm. "I'm not here to be a band-aid for your wounds, Sarah. I'm here because I want to be a part of your healing. If it's too soon for you, I understand. I'm not going anywhere. I just want you to know that when you're ready, I'll be here for you and with you." The sincerity in his words took her breath away. She had spent so long in the shadows of betrayal and heartbreak that the idea of someone caring about her in such a genuine way seemed almost impossible. But here Max was offering her just that. And in that moment, Sarah realized that she hadn't been allowing herself to believe in love again because she was scared too. Max was patient, kind, and understanding, but that didn't mean her past didn't still haunt her. She couldn't shake the memories of Liam's lies, the months of trying to fix something that was beyond repair, but Max was offering her a fresh start. And she didn't want to shut that door before even giving it a chance. You make it sound so easy, Sarah said with a small, uncertain smile. But what if it's not? Then we take it one step at a time, Max answered. We don't rush. We don't force anything, we just see where it goes. Together, Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her past pressing against her chest. It wasn't easy, it wouldn't be, but for the first time, she could see the possibility of something better, something real, I think. I think I'd like to try, she said quietly, her voice filled with a new sense of determination, but I need to do it on my terms. No pressure, just let me figure it out as I go. Max's face lit up with a smile, one that made her heart flutter. No pressure, just us figuring it out together, and as they continued walking through the park hand in hand, Sarah felt something shift inside her. For the first time in a long while, she wasn't running from her past. She wasn't hiding from her feelings. She was facing the future with an open heart, unsure of what it would bring but ready to embrace whatever came next, letting go of the past. The morning light filtered through the curtains, casting a soft glow over Sarah's apartment. It was a peaceful, almost serene scene, one that felt foreign to her these days. As much as she tried to embrace the calm, something inside her refused to settle. The thoughts that had been racing in her mind all night seemed louder than ever. She had spent the last few months trying to pick up the pieces of her broken heart, and yet here she was unsure of whether or not she was ready to start over. Sarah stood by the window, looking out at the city. Her mind clouded with conflicting emotions. She had spent years with Liam, building a future in her mind that had turned to dust overnight. The betrayal, the lies, everything about their relationship had been tainted by that one horrific moment. And then there was Max. Max had entered her life unexpectedly. At first he had been nothing more than a kind stranger, someone to lean on when everything around her had seemed to fall apart. But over time, as he had patiently stood by her side, she had begun to wonder, could he be the one to help her heal? Was it possible to love again after all the hurt? Her phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Max. Hey, just checking in. How are you holding up today? Sarah stared at the message for a long moment. He had been so kind, so understanding. Every day he seemed to find ways to ease the heaviness in her heart, but was it enough? Could she really let go of the past and build something new with him? The problem was that Sarah wasn't sure if she was ready. Every time she looked at Max, she saw hope. Hope for a future where she wasn't constantly haunted by the ghost of Liam. But the fear that had been buried deep inside her for so long began to rise again. What if she was wrong? What if trusting someone else meant being hurt again? She wasn't sure she could survive another betrayal. Taking a deep breath, Sarah texted back, I'm doing okay. Just trying to figure things out. Thank you for checking in. It was a simple reply, but it felt like a wall she had built between herself and him. She knew Max deserved more than that, but the walls around her heart were still too high. That evening, Max showed up at her door as he had so many times before, but tonight there was something different in his eyes, a quiet determination that made Sarah's heart race. He wasn't here to just check in. He was here for something more. Sarah, Max said softly, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it, as if he had something important to say. Can we talk? She nodded, stepping aside to let him in. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of comfort, now felt like a cage. She led him to the living room. Her hands trembling slightly, the familiar smell of his cologne filled the room, but the space between them felt vast. She didn't know how to bridge that gap anymore. Max sat down on the couch and looked at her with a mixture of concern and resolve. He leaned forward, his gaze never leaving hers. Sarah, I know you've been through a lot. I know you're scared, but I need to know if you're ready to take a step forward with me. I can't keep waiting in the wings, hoping that one day you'll see what's right in front of you. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The vulnerability in his voice took her by surprise. She had always seen Max as someone strong, someone who had it all together, but in that moment he seemed just as fragile as she felt. I don't know if I can do this, she whispered. Her voice wavered, betraying the fear she had buried for so long. I don't know if I can trust again. What if I'm wrong? What if I let you in and I end up hurt just like I was with Liam? Max's face softened and he reached out to gently take her hand. Sarah, I can't promise you that everything will be perfect. I can't promise you that I won't make mistakes. But I can promise you that I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because I see the person you are, the strength you have even when you think you've lost it. I'm here because I want to see you happy and I want to be part of that. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as his words sank in. She had spent so long hiding behind her pain, afraid to let anyone in, but Max's sincerity was undeniable. His presence in her life had been a steady force. A gentle reminder that not everyone was like Liam. Maybe she didn't have to carry the weight of her past forever. Maybe, just maybe she could start again. Max, I don't know if I'm ready, she said, her voice breaking. I still think about Liam and it feels like it's all I can do to keep moving forward. I know, Max said softly, and that's okay. You don't have to forget the past to move on, but you have to allow yourself the chance to heal. You have to believe that you deserve to be loved, not just by me, but by yourself too. Sarah closed her eyes, letting his words wash over her. It felt like a weight had been lifted, but there was still so much fear inside her. Would she ever be able to fully trust again? Would she ever stop seeing Liam in every other man, including Max? I want to try, she whispered, finally, her heart pounding in her chest. But I need time. I need to know that I'm not just rushing into something because it's easier than facing the truth. Max nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. Take all the time you need, Sarah. I'm not going anywhere, but just know that I'm here and I care about you more than you know. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a spark of hope. It wasn't a guarantee, but it was a beginning. She wasn't alone, and maybe, just maybe, she could rebuild herself piece by piece with Max by her side. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. Each day she felt herself taking tiny steps forward, slowly unraveling the tangled mess of her heart. She began to trust Max more, allowing herself to enjoy the moments they shared without the constant cloud of doubt hanging over her head. But just as things began to feel easier, the past had a way of creeping in, reminding her of the pain she thought she had left behind. Would she ever truly be free of it? Could she ever love without the constant fear of being hurt again? These were the questions that haunted Sarah as she moved through her days. But one thing was clear, she was no longer alone in this journey. And with Max by her side, maybe, just maybe, she could learn to let go of the past and embrace the future that awaited her. Sarah had spent the past few days feeling the warmth of her growing connection with Max. It was almost surreal, like she was walking on air. Each moment with him seemed to breathe new life into her. She was finally starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a future filled with love and happiness again. But life, it seemed, had different plans for her. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning when it all started. Sarah had just finished her morning coffee and was about to head out to a work meeting when she received an unexpected message from a number she didn't recognize. It was a simple message, but one that would change everything. Sarah, I need to talk to you. It's important. Please don't ignore this. Max's ex. Her heart skipped a beat. Max's ex. She had known he had a past, but to receive a message like this was unsettling. What did this person want, or why was she reaching out to Sarah now? A swirl of emotions rushed through her. She considered ignoring the message, but something told her that ignoring it wouldn't be the right choice. She had to know. After a brief pause, she decided to reply. What do you need to talk about? The reply came quickly. I think you deserve to know the truth about Max. I didn't want to be the one to tell you, but I can't stay silent any longer. A chill ran down Sarah's spine. Her hands began to shake as she read the words. She had no idea what this woman was referring to, but the feeling of dread began to settle in her chest. Was it possible that Max had been hiding something from her? A few more messages followed, each one more unsettling than the last. He's been lying to you. I'm not the only one. You're not the first woman he's said he's moved on with. He tells you he's ready for a new life, but he hasn't really let go of the past. He hasn't let go of me. I don't want to cause trouble, but you deserve to know. You're falling for someone who hasn't been honest with you. Just be careful. Sarah's mind raced. What was going on? She had been so sure about Max, so certain that their connection was genuine, but now doubt began to creep in, gnawing at her thoughts. Could everything she believed in be a lie? Later that day, Sarah met Max for dinner at the same restaurant they had visited on their second date. The setting was cozy, just as it had been the first time. But this time the ambience felt suffocating. As they sat down, Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. She needed to know the truth. Max greeted her with his usual warm smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. She could tell something was off, but she couldn't put her finger on it. After they ordered their food, Sarah took a deep breath. It was now or never, Max. There's something I need to ask you. She began, her voice trembling just a little. I got a message today from someone who said they were your ex. They said you weren't being honest with me. Max's face went pale. His fork clinked against his plate as he slowly put it down, his eyes flickering with a mixture of shock and guilt. Sarah? He started, his voice quiet. I can explain. I deserve the truth. Max, Sarah interrupted, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. Why didn't you tell me about her? Why didn't you tell me about your past? Max ran a hand through his hair, his eyes avoiding hers. He seemed conflicted, torn between telling the truth and keeping up the facade he had built. But Sarah wasn't going to let him hide anymore. Please, she whispered, her heart pounding in her chest. Don't lie to me. Finally, Max met her gaze, his eyes filled with both sorrow and regret. Sarah, I've been trying so hard to move on. I didn't want you to know about her because I didn't want you to think that it would affect us, but the truth is, I haven't completely let go. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't, and I don't know how to fix this. The words hit Sarah like a freight train. All the doubts she had buried deep inside, all the questions she had avoided asking, suddenly flooded to the surface. Max hadn't been honest with her. He hadn't been truthful about his past, and now she was left standing in the wreckage of their relationship. I don't know what to say. Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. You were right there for me when I needed someone, Max. But now, I don't know if I can trust you anymore. And Max reached across the table, his hand trembling as he touched hers. Sarah, I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could leave her behind, but the truth is I haven't been able to, and I don't know how to let go. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. She had been so sure, so certain that Max was the one, but now standing in the truth of it all, she realized that she had been holding onto a dream, a version of Max that wasn't entirely real. I can't keep doing this, Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. I can't keep giving pieces of myself to someone who isn't ready to give me all of them. With that, she stood up, the weight of her decision crashing down on her. It felt like the ground beneath her was crumbling, but she knew it was the right choice. As she walked away from the table, she could hear Max calling her name, but she didn't look back. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt the truth settle in. She was alone, but she wasn't broken. This was her moment to walk away, to leave behind the man who had lied to her, and to find the strength to stand on her own again. The road to rediscovery, the morning after the confrontation with Max, felt like a blur. Sarah had spent the entire night tossing and turning, wrestling with the storm of emotions inside her: anger, betrayal, sadness, but above all, an overwhelming sense of loss. The loss of someone she had thought she could trust, someone she had let into her heart, only to find that the man she had been building a future with was not the person she had believed him to be. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the empty space where Max had slept just hours ago. The weight of his words echoed in her mind, but now it all felt like an illusion, a cruel joke. How could she have been so blind? How could she have ignored the warning signs? In her search for love, she had lost herself, and now it felt like the only thing left was the gaping hole where her trust in Max once was. Her phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Emma. You okay? I'm worried about you. Sarah stared at the message for a moment, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. But she couldn't bring herself to reply. She didn't know how to explain to Emma what had happened, let alone how she was feeling. The truth was, she wasn't sure she understood it herself. Instead, Sarah slid out of bed and went to the small kitchen of her apartment. The familiarity of her surroundings gave her a small sense of comfort, but even that felt different today. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the warmth from the mug helping to steady her hands as she sat by the window looking out at the city that had become a silent witness to the upheaval in her life. For the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't have an answer. She didn't have a plan. She didn't know what the future held or what her next step should be. Everything she had thought she wanted, the life she had imagined with Max, the family, the stability, had shattered in one conversation. She realized then that she had been living for someone else. She had been so consumed with the idea of love and partnership that she had let it define her, leaving little room for the most important thing of all, herself. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Startled, Sarah glanced at the clock. It was barely 9 a.m. She wasn't expecting anyone. Hesitantly, she walked to the door and opened it, only to find Emma standing there, a concerned expression on her face. Sarah, we need to talk, Emma said softly, her tone filled with a mix of worry and determination. I know something happened between you two, and I just want to make sure you're okay. Sarah didn't speak. She couldn't. The flood of emotions threatened to spill over, and she felt like she might break down if she said even one word. Instead, she stepped aside, allowing Emma to enter. The warmth of her friend's presence felt like a balm to her aching heart. They sat down on the couch and Emma didn't push. She simply waited, her silent support louder than any words could be. Sarah took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clasped them together. Max cheated on me. She whispered, her voice barely audible. I found out last night. I saw it with my own eyes. Emma's eyes widened in shock, but she quickly reached for Sarah's hand. Oh, Sarah, she murmured. I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Neither did I, Sarah replied, her voice thick with emotion. I thought he was everything I wanted. I thought he was the one you know, but now I just feel lost, like I don't even know who I am anymore. Emma squeezed her hand, her presence steady and grounding. You don't have to figure everything out right now. Take your time. But you are not alone in this, okay? You don't need him to define who you are. Sarah looked up at Emma, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know if I can get past this. I don't know if I can trust again. I don't even know if I'll ever be the person I was before. You will, Emma said firmly. You're stronger than you think. I know. It's hard right now, but this pain, it won't last forever, and you will find yourself again. Maybe not today, but soon. No tears welled in Sarah's eyes, but instead of falling, they froze as if Emma's words had given her a sense of calm she hadn't known she needed. For the first time in hours, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe she didn't have all the answers, and maybe she was hurt and lost, but Emma was right. She was stronger than she realized. Emma stayed for hours, not saying much, just being there. They talked a little, laughed a little, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Sarah didn't feel like the world was closing in on her. Later that afternoon, Emma left and Sarah was left alone with her thoughts, but this time it didn't feel as overwhelming. She took a deep breath and made a decision. She was going to take control of her life again. She didn't need Max or anyone else to validate her. She had everything she needed within herself. It was time to start rebuilding, and so Sarah spent the next few days doing just that. She joined a yoga class, something she had always wanted to do but never found the time for. She called her parents and reconnected with old friends. She started painting again, something she hadn't done in years. Slowly she felt the fog of heartbreak begin to lift, replaced by something stronger. A quiet, resilient strength that had always been there but had been buried beneath the weight of someone else's expectations. One evening, as she sat on her couch with a glass of wine and a book in hand, Sarah realized something profound. She wasn't just healing, she was growing. She was becoming a new version of herself, a version that didn't rely on anyone's approval to feel worthy. She didn't need anyone to complete her. She was whole on her own. Her phone buzzed and she saw a message from Max. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. I'm sorry, Sarah. I never meant to hurt you. Can we talk? She stared at the message, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, but after a few moments she put the phone down, deciding that no message from him could change the progress she had made. She wasn't the same person who had been devastated by his betrayal. She had found her strength and she was finally ready to move forward without him. And with that, Sarah closed her eyes, took a deep breath and smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of her journey. The next few weeks felt like a new chapter. Sarah had started to embrace her life on her own terms, but it wasn't without its challenges. There were moments when the pain of Max's betrayal would creep up on her, catching her off guard, but each time she fought it back with more resilience. She was learning to reclaim her peace, finding strength in the things she loved and the people who truly cared for her. The yoga classes became a sanctuary for her, a space where she could silence the noise in her mind and focus only on her body. It wasn't just about the physical practice, it was about reconnecting with herself, finding her breath and learning to let go. Each downward dog, each stretch, each breath was a reminder that she was healing piece by piece. One evening after her yoga class, Sarah sat in a small cafe near her apartment, sipping on chamomile tea, her mind wandering as she stared out at the bustling street. It was one of those rare moments where everything felt still, a moment of reflection, a moment of peace. Her foot buzzed in her bag, snapping her out of her thoughts. She reached for it, half expecting it to be another message from Max. But when she saw the name, her heart skipped a beat. It was from her old friend Rachel, whom she hadn't heard from in months. Hey Sarah, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. Let's catch up soon. I miss our talks. How about dinner tomorrow? Sarah smiled, a warmth spreading through her chest. Rachel had been one of the few people who had always understood her. They had been close in college, sharing everything from laughter to heartbreak. Life had pulled them in different directions, but now, with everything that had happened, Sarah knew this was the perfect opportunity to reconnect. She quickly typed a response. I'd love that. Tomorrow. Works. Can't wait to see you. The next evening, Sarah found herself in a cozy little Italian restaurant downtown, waiting at a corner table for Rachel when she arrived. Rachel greeted her with a warm hug as if no time had passed at all. You look amazing, Sarah, Rachel said, her eyes scanning Sarah with genuine admiration. How have you been, really? Sarah hesitated for a moment before answering. I've been better. But I'm getting there. I've learned a lot about myself lately. Rachel smiled knowingly. I figured. You've always been strong, even when you didn't realize it. They sat down and the conversation flowed effortlessly just like old times. Sarah felt a sense of ease she hadn't felt in a long time, surrounded by the familiarity of a true friend. As they chatted about their lives, Rachel shared some of her own challenges, and Sarah found herself offering words of encouragement, advice she had learned to live by over the past few weeks. But it wasn't until dessert arrived and they were sipping on wine that Rachel leaned in a little closer, her tone shifting slightly. Sarah, I don't want to make this uncomfortable, but I have to ask, how are you really doing with everything that happened with Max? Sarah sighed, setting her glass down and looking out the window for a moment. It's been tough, Rachel. I won't lie, the betrayal, the heartbreak, it's been a lot to process. But I'm slowly learning that my life doesn't revolve around him anymore. It's about me now, and I'm finding my way back to who I really am. Rachel nodded, her eyes soft with understanding. You know, I've always admired that about you. Even in the toughest moments, you've always found a way to keep going. I have no doubt that you'll come out of this stronger. The words were exactly what Sarah needed to hear. She didn't feel fully healed, but hearing Rachel's faith in her gave her hope that she was on the right path. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, she was ready to face it with strength and clarity. Over the following week, Sarah's life took on a new rhythm. She was still working at her job, but she found herself delegating tasks with more confidence, taking on projects that excited her. She started spending more time on her passions, taking weekend trips to explore new places, hiking in nature, and reconnecting with friends. Her relationship with Rachel grew even stronger, and they made plans to meet up more often. They both knew that they didn't need a man to complete them. They had each other, and that was enough. It was during one of their outings that Sarah realized just how much she had transformed. She was walking down the street chatting with Rachel when she noticed a reflection in a shop window. It was her own image, and for the first time in months she didn't feel like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She smiled at the reflection, at the woman staring back at her. She was strong. She was free, and she was finally starting to feel whole again. But as Sarah continued to rebuild her life, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. She had moved on from Max, she was healing, but there was still a part of her that longed for true connection, true love. And though she didn't know it yet, that connection was closer than she realized. One evening, as she was finishing a late shift at work, Sarah bumped into someone in the elevator. She had just finished a long day and was looking forward to going home. But as the doors slid open, she was met with a familiar face. It was Andrew, a colleague she had worked with on a few projects. They had always been cordial, but tonight something about his presence felt different. There was a warmth to his smile that she hadn't noticed before. And when their eyes met, Sarah felt a flutter in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hey Sarah, Andrew said with a friendly smile. I didn't expect to see you here this late. How are you? For a moment, Sarah was caught off guard, but she quickly composed herself, returning his smile. I'm good, just finishing up. It's been a long day. As they chatted briefly, Sarah found herself intrigued by Andrew's easygoing demeanor and the way he made her feel comfortable. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but she knew that for the first time since Max, she wasn't closed off to the possibility of something more. When the elevator doors opened, they exchanged pleasantries and Sarah stepped out, her mind swirling with new thoughts. Could this be the beginning of something different? Could she open her heart again, this time with more wisdom, more awareness of who she was? As she walked home, Sarah couldn't help but smile to herself. Life had a funny way of surprising her when she least expected it. The unexpected turn, Sarah's life was beginning to fall into place in ways she never expected. After months of healing, self-discovery, and growth, she was starting to believe in the possibility of a future filled with joy, fulfillment, and maybe even love. But sometimes life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs just when you think you've found your balance. It had been a week since Sarah's chance encounter with Andrew in the elevator. They had exchanged numbers, and though their conversations were still casual, Sarah couldn't deny that there was something about him. He was kind, thoughtful, and unlike Max, didn't carry an air of entitlement. But as much as Sarah wanted to open her heart to this new connection, she wasn't sure if she was ready to take the leap into something deeper. One evening after a long day of work, Sarah decided to grab a cup of coffee at the same cafe she had visited months ago when she first began to pick up the pieces of her broken heart. It was comforting, almost nostalgic to be there. She sat by the window watching the city lights flicker on as the night descended, her mind wandering. Just as she took a sip of her coffee, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, expecting it to be a message from Rachel or one of her other friends. But when she saw the name, her heart skipped a beat. It was Max. Sarah, we need to talk, please. Her hands trembled slightly as she stared at the message, a flood of memories rushing back. She had spent months trying to erase him from her life, trying to forget the pain he caused her. Why now? Why after everything that had happened? For a moment, Sarah sat frozen, unsure of what to do, but as the minutes passed, a sense of calm washed over her. She had come so far. She had worked too hard to rebuild her life, to let Max back in and disrupt it once again. But as she thought about it more, she realized that she needed closure. She needed to face him, not for him, but for herself. She took a deep breath and typed her response, "Fine. Meet me at 7 p.m. But this is the last time, Max." When Sarah arrived at the cafe at 7 p.m., her stomach twisted with nerves. She didn't know what to expect. Was he going to apologize? Was he going to try and win her back like so many exes do in movies? Or was this just another attempt to control the narrative to make her feel like she owed him something? Max was already sitting at a table, nervously glancing at his watch. When he saw Sarah approach, he stood up, but Sarah immediately gestured for him to sit back down. She wasn't here for theatrics, for any apologies that would only make him feel better. She was here to get answers. "Sarah, I know I've messed up. I've done terrible things, and I've hurt you in ways I can never fix." Max began, his voice strained, full of regret. "I've spent so many sleepless nights thinking about everything about us, about what we could have had." Sarah folded her arms, keeping her gaze steady. "Max, stop. I don't need you to tell me how bad you feel. I need you to understand that I'm done. We're done." He flinched at her words, but he didn't interrupt her. Sarah took a deep breath, gathering the strength she'd worked so hard to build. "I spent years of my life with you, believing in something that wasn't real. You made me feel like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't worthy of trust. You betrayed me in every way possible. Max, I don't want to carry that anymore." Max's eyes darkened and he leaned forward, his voice quiet but insistent. "I know I hurt you, but I'm asking for a second chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I need you to know that I love you. I always have." Sarah felt a pang of emotion, but she pushed it away. She wasn't here to be swept up in his words again. She was here to take her power back. "No, Max, I can't. I've learned so much since we ended things. I've realized that love is about respect, trust, and understanding. And you never gave me that. You're asking for a second chance, but I'm not the same person who would have given it to you." Max's face softened, and for a moment Sarah saw a glimmer of the man she once loved. But it was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared. "You're right," he said, his voice cracking. "I don't deserve you, I never did, but please just let me prove that I can change." Sarah stood up, her heart steady. "It's too late for that. I need to live for me now, not for what you want from me." With those final words, Sarah turned and walked away from the man who had once been her everything. As she stepped out of the cafe, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The closure she had been seeking for months was finally here. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. She felt a sense of relief, but also a deep sadness, as though she were mourning the loss of a dream that had never been real. But with each passing day, Sarah felt herself growing stronger. She had faced her past, stood up for herself, and refused to let anyone dim her light again. One evening, as she was walking home from work, her phone buzzed. It was Andrew. "Hey Sarah, I was wondering if you'd like to grab dinner tonight. I know this is a little last minute, but I've been thinking about you a lot lately." Sarah smiled at the message. She had been thinking about Andrew too, but she hadn't wanted to rush things. However, she couldn't deny that there was something about him that made her feel at ease. He wasn't like Max. He didn't make her feel small or insignificant. She quickly typed her response. "I'd love to." That evening, they met at a small, intimate restaurant in the city. The conversation was light, filled with laughter and shared stories. Sarah could feel the warmth between them, a connection that wasn't forced or rushed. It was genuine. As the night went on, Sarah found herself opening up more than she had in a long time. She shared her experiences, her fears, and her dreams. Andrew listened intently, never interrupting, always showing a kind, reassuring presence. For the first time since everything fell apart with Max, Sarah felt like she could be herself again. She wasn't pretending to be someone she wasn't. She wasn't hiding the hurt or the scars from her past. And as Andrew reached across the table, taking her hand in his, she realized that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. Something that didn't come with the baggage of her past, but with the promise of a future she could shape on her own terms. A love reborn. The days following that dinner with Andrew were filled with anticipation as Sarah found herself gradually allowing someone back into her heart. She was cautious, of course. She had been hurt before, and she wasn't about to throw her heart into something without taking the time to truly understand it. But there was something undeniable about Andrew, something she hadn't felt in a long time. With him, she felt like herself again, not the broken version of herself she had been when she was with Max, but the Sarah she had always wanted to be, strong, confident, and capable of love. Andrew never rushed her. He respected her space, gave her the time she needed to process everything, and never pressured her to make a decision. The more they spent time together, the more Sarah realized that this relationship, this connection felt different. There were no games, no manipulation, just two people who truly enjoyed each other's company. One afternoon, Sarah found herself walking through the park thinking about how far she had come. She had been through so much, from the heartbreak of discovering Max's betrayal to finding the strength to stand up for herself and finally walk away, and now she was building a new life, one where she had the freedom to choose her own happiness. As so she sat on a bench watching the autumn leaves drift from the trees, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Andrew. "Hey Sarah, I was wondering if you'd like to take a weekend trip. I know it's a little soon, but I think it would be a good opportunity for us to get away and enjoy some time to ourselves. No pressure, just a chance to relax and get to know each other better." The message was simple, but it struck a chord with Sarah. A weekend away. She had always loved the idea of escaping to somewhere beautiful, somewhere peaceful, and the idea of doing it with Andrew, someone who had shown her so much care and understanding, felt right. She smiled as she typed her response, "I'd love to. Let's make it happen." The weekend arrived sooner than expected, and before she knew it, Sarah and Andrew were driving out of the city toward a small cabin by a lake. It was a quiet, serene place, just what Sarah needed after everything that had happened. The cabin was simple, rustic, and cozy, with a crackling fireplace and a view of the still waters that stretched out before them. As they settled in, Andrew suggested a hike to explore the area. Sarah, excited by the thought of fresh air and nature, eagerly agreed. They spent the next few hours walking through the woods, laughing and talking, with Andrew showing Sarah the trails he had explored in the past. It was a quiet kind of joy, no rush, no expectations, just the two of them enjoying each other's presence. Later, as they sat by the fire sipping hot cocoa, Andrew turned to her, his gaze soft and genuine. "I've been thinking a lot about us, Sarah, about everything we've been through, and how we're both trying to move forward from our pasts." Sarah looked at him, her heart warm. "I know it's been a journey, hasn't it?" Yeah. Andrew said, his voice steady, "And I don't want to rush anything with you, but I need you to know something." He paused, taking a deep breath. "I care about you, Sarah, more than I've cared about anyone in a long time. I'm not asking for anything right now, but I want you to know that I'm here. I'm here for you, and I'm willing to take things at your pace." Sarah felt her chest tighten at his words. She had been so scared of opening herself up to someone again, afraid of repeating the past, but in that moment, as she looked at Andrew, she realized that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something beautiful to grow between them. "I care about you too," she said softly, her voice full of emotion, "and I don't want to rush either. I just want to take things slow, enjoy where we are now." Andrew smiled, his eyes lighting up with relief. "That's all I want too, Sarah, to take our time and see where this goes." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the warmth of the fire crackling in the background. Sarah felt at peace. Truly at peace for the first time in a long time. She had faced her past, stood up for herself, and now she was opening herself up to a future full of possibility. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of new beginnings. Sarah and Andrew spent more time together, exploring the city, trying new restaurants, and sharing moments that made Sarah feel like she was truly living again. The bond between them grew deeper as they talked about their dreams, their fears, and the things that mattered most to them. And while they both took things slow, the connection between them was undeniable. But just as Sarah was beginning to let her guard down, her past came knocking on her door. One evening, as she was returning home from work, Sarah's phone. It was a number she didn't recognize, but she answered anyway. "Hello, Sarah," a familiar voice said. "It's Max." Her heart skipped a beat and she felt a knot form in her stomach. It had been months since she had spoken to him, and now, here he was out of nowhere calling her again. "What do you want?" "Max," Sarah's voice was steady, but inside she was a bundle of nerves. I need to explain myself," Max said, his tone desperate. "I've been thinking about you, about us, and I know I hurt you, but I want to make things right. Please just hear me out." Sarah closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. She had moved on. She was happy with Andrew. She didn't need to reopen old wounds. "I don't need you to make things right, Max. I've made my peace with everything. I've moved on," she said firmly, her voice strong. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Please just give me a chance to talk," Max pleaded. Sarah took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had come so far, she had found peace, she had found love again. She couldn't let Max drag her back into the chaos. No, Max, she said, her voice unwavering. This is over. It's been over for a long time. Please don't contact me again. With that, she hung up the phone, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had made the right choice. She wasn't going to let her past dictate her future. The next day, Sarah met with Andrew for lunch, and as they sat together at a small cafe, she shared what had happened. Andrew listened intently, his hand gently resting on hers. You made the right choice, he said softly. You've come so far, Sarah. Don't let anything pull you back. Sarah smiled, feeling the weight of his words. She had come so far, she had faced her past, healed, and allowed herself to love again. And now, with Andrew by her side, she was ready to embrace the future.